This is Joshua Hart here for Seconds Out. Delighted today to be joined by Mr. Andy Clarke. Andy, first of all, thank you very much for your time this morning and how are you doing?
No problem. I'm good. Yeah, it's a lovely bank holiday weekend. Didn't have any work this weekend, so just enjoying the sunshine, really. Looking forward to heading out at some point this afternoon and then getting ready for a really busy couple of weeks.
Sounds interesting. Sounds good to hear as well. Go out and enjoy the sun. Obviously, I've got you on here this morning to talk about, I guess we'll start off with what happened in the early hours of Sunday morning. Canelo took on Jaime Munguia. A very routine, standard performance from Canelo, picking up a nice unanimous decision victory. I guess first of all, what did you make of the performance from Canelo of what you've seen?
I thought it was a decent performance. He won the fight clearly. I would say in terms of rounds, it was probably 9-3. Probably looked like the right kind of score. There was the knockdown as well, which was a good clean shot. And he just turned out to be, and it wasn't an enormous surprise, just too much for Munguia. Munguia went the distance, and I don't think did himself any harm at all. I think his stock, if anything, will have risen off the back of a performance like that. It was always going to be a big ask for him to cause the upset. I never really felt that he was going to be capable of doing that, but be capable of giving him a decent, good, hard fight. And I thought he did that. So a little bit predictable, which isn't necessarily what we always want to see, because I think we're getting to the stage with Canelo now where, and this is just a cycle of boxing life, where we feel like he probably hasn't got that long left. And as fans, we would probably like to see someone beat him, and, claim the torch and become the next big name or one of the next big names in the sport. That's kind of where he's at now. And that everybody gets there. You get to that stage where, as a big name, people think, oh, okay, you've had a great run, you've been brilliant, but it's time for someone to kind of topple you and claim the throne. And Munguia wasn't quite that guy. So he's still got some gas in the tank there, Canelo, by the look of it.
I mean, I guess we'll just quickly talk about Munguia. Where could he go next? Obviously, if you look at his record and see that he's a man who's 44 fights deep into his professional career, you'd think, oh, he's probably coming up to the back end of it. But he is only 27 years old. He's very young in this game, from what it seems. If you were guiding the career of Jaime Munguia, where would you take him next?
I think, like you say, there's plenty of possibilities for him. He has had a lot of fights, but it did take him quite a while to kind of come to the fore, as it were. He's good to watch. He's always been good to watch. So he's pretty marketable from that point of view. I think you just keep him at that high level. There's no point looking to do anything other with him than just keep him boxing at world level, thinking that Canelo probably won't be around at super middle for all that much longer. And then it'll become a bit of a free for all in a sense, because the belts will become available. You'd imagine that will be what will happen. So there's no need to do anything particularly drastic with him. I wouldn't have thought. As I say, I don't think that defeat doesn't really set him back. A win would have been absolutely massive, but a defeat, going the distance, it's not. It's not any kind of. It's not even really a setback. I wouldn't even really describe it as that, to be honest, because really not many people I spoke to, and if anyone, thought that he was going to win.
Fair enough. It's something that I'd seen not even just recently, over I guess say the last year, 2 years with Canelo, is a lot of people starting to suggest that he could possibly be on the decline. After seeing his performance last night, do you agree with the statement that Canelo is on the decline?
Well, when you get past a certain age, when you've had a lot of fights, then physically you are going to start to deteriorate. That's just a physiological fact. If you're clean, if you're doing things right, then that is what will happen. And I think we have seen signs of it. I don't think he's as busy as he used to be when it comes to punching in combination. What he's tended to do more recently is just kind of literally look to beat on people, and break them down, whether he hits arms, whether he hits shoulders, whatever it is. He just puts it on them, lands heavy shots, thinking that they're not going to be able to take this for too long. And that's proved to be the case, apart from with Bivol, because Bivol was up at light heavyweight and he was able to withstand that and then come back with his with his own boxing. So it didn't work against him, but it has worked against everybody else. So I'd say that those gears have slightly left him. But that's what happens as you get older, that ability to kind of really up the tempo, flick that switch and go into another gear, that goes. And I think that has gone with him. And I kind of like to see it, if anything, because it is an indication that, you know, they are doing things in the right way. And I'm well aware, of course, that Canelo has had his controversies around positive tests in the past. You know, there's no point trying to gloss over that. But what I think when somebody comes towards the end is that you can delay that end if you still have the hunger for it. That's what it comes down to in the final analysis. That is what it comes down to. People talk about fighters getting old overnight or that kind of thing. Oh, they just haven't got it anymore. They can't do this. They can't do that. And I don't think it's not purely a physical thing, because at that level, they're that kind of resolute that to an extent their body will do what their mind tells it to. Now, there will be a point, obviously, where that no longer applies, because you just get past a certain age and you just, you know, your body isn't up to that elite level anymore. But you can keep it there through sheer kind of willpower almost for quite a long time if you are of a mind to. And it looks to me like he is still hungry. And whilst he's still in that frame of mind, then he will get himself to perform in the gym to the level that he needs to be fully prepared on the night. And then he'll be able to drag performances out of himself on the night, even if it gets really, really hard. So yes, he is declining. He has been, I think, over the last 2-3 years, maybe, but it's to be expected. And he is literally fighting the good fight. He's staving that off for as long as he possibly can. And that's a sign that he's still bang up for it, basically. And whilst he is, he's going to remain a big force.
I guess when you mention, obviously, Canelo's still showing the signs that he still has the hunger for the sport. I think we've really noticed that, especially in interviews this week when he's being questioned about fighting these other guys. One name in particular that has always been floating about with him is David Benavidez. Canelo has said that he'll take the fight if the money's right, and even went to the extent of saying that he would fight David Benavidez and Jaime Munguia in one evening. If they were to fight next, who would you side with, and who wins and how?
I still feel like you would have to make him favourite, Canelo, but I do think that is the fight, and I think we've all thought that for a little while now. And I do think that he will deliver that fight, because it's not like he's got some kind of history, Canelo, of ducking people. You know, he hasn't. You look at his resume. You can always pick holes in anything and say that he waited a long time before he got Golovkin in the ring, for example. But when you're the A side, when you're a massive, massive star, which he is, then you do tend to get things on your terms. That's just the way that it's always been. But I don't think anyone could look at his record and with a straight face be that critical of it, to be honest. So I feel like he will take that fight against Benavidez. Funnily enough, I think if he'd taken this fight, then that would have been better for him than waiting, because the longer you wait, potentially at this stage, the better Benavidez will get, and maybe just that little bit further down the other side of the slope you go. But I think it's a really, really good matchup, and it's what we want, because Benavidez could maybe be that next guy, and Canelo will know that. And obviously with the Mexican aspect to it too, then that gives it another dimension. And we had that with Munguia, obviously, but this is, I think people would look at Benavidez and give him a better chance than they gave Munguia. So it's absolutely the fight that we all want, and it might be the kind of fight where, off the back of it, he might start to think about, okay, what else is there really left for me to do, unless he wants to try his luck at light heavyweight again. But that's all, you know, we had some bad news, didn't we, over the last couple of days with the injury to Beterbiev. So that's going to be kicked back, by the sound of the injury, by a reasonable period of time.
Yeah, it does sound
that
like that.
Kind of circumstances conspire against him getting another chance at light heavy, Canelo.
I guess that was obviously the next point I was going to move on to. Canelo has mentioned in many interviews since his defeat to Dmitry Bivol that he would love the opportunity to get the rematch and run it back. If it were, let's say, to happen this year, which seems highly unlikely due to how everything has played out in the last couple of days, um, who do you believe would win that fight?
If he rematched Bivol, I think it would probably be the same again, because I do feel like since he had that first fight, although he will have learned stuff from that first fight, essentially nothing has really changed. He's still really a super middleweight against a light heavyweight, and that fight against Bivol in itself will have put a few miles on the clock. So the most sensible argument would be that he's not quite as good as he was when he boxed Bivol the first time, and I don't think Bivol's showing any signs of deterioration. So I would say that the result would repeat itself, and that the scores would maybe be wider. But that's not to say that he wouldn't take it, because of course he would, and he will think that he's going to win. But if you're in the Canelo business, if you're around him, you would probably be trying to gently steer him away from light heavyweight. But if he decides that's what he wants to do, then obviously that's what's going to happen. But that situation is complicated by the fact that obviously Beterbiev and Bivol aren't going to fight on June the 1st. It will be whenever it ends up being, but my guess would probably be more like kind of autumn time, maybe nearer the end of the year than the middle of the year, which is where it was supposed to be. We'll have to wait and see on that. Maybe Bivol will try and fight on June the 1st anyway. It's 3 weeks, there's just about enough time for someone to step up and take that. But yeah, it's the light heavyweight thing for Canelo. I don't think would be. I don't. It's too far. I think it's against Bivol. It's shown that it's too far. It wouldn't have been against somebody else, because Bivol's an exceptional fighter, and so is Beterbiev. And if they weren't around, then he probably, in another kind of period of time, might have been able to go up to light heavyweight and clean up, but not with them.
I guess sticking with the light heavyweight division, obviously, like we've mentioned, Dimitri Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev will not be happening on June 1st anymore. From what I've been reading, about the injury, it seems that Artur Beterbiev's going to be out of action until at least September. I don't know if that's him being fit to fight or just not even being able to train until September. But either way, it seems like there's going to be a lengthy wait until we can see a new schedule date, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, because the meniscus, which is basically in your kneecap, isn't it? That's those kinds of injuries are not all that quick, and you hear about them mostly in the context of football, and the recovery period for a footballer than for a boxer will be longer, because the demands of the sport are different. Obviously, there's a lot more twisting and turning. So when you see that the boxer has damaged their knee, maybe they've torn an ACL or a cruciate, or done something to their meniscus or something like that, then it's not quite the same, because they don't need that same range of movement. But at the same time, it is still serious. So yeah, that my guess was when I saw it yesterday, was that it would be that would be pretty much the quickest, to be honest, that he could get back. And he has had a couple of injuries in recent times, hasn't he? Because the fight with Callum Smith was postponed. And that's an indication, I think, of where he is in terms of his age and his career, because there haven't been any great signs of deterioration in the ring from Beterbiev, but training camps are hard. And at some point they start to take their toll, and you start to pick up more injuries than you used to. And that, again, that's just life, for an elite level athlete. There's no getting around that. So it could be that he doesn't really have too many more training camps in him. Basically, it's not necessarily what comes down to happening on the night. It's getting to the night. That's what can become really difficult. If you speak to footballers, for example, they will say they chose to retire because it wasn't the Saturday. The Saturday was great. It was getting to Saturday. It was all the things they had to do during the week, all the deep tissue, all the ice baths, all of that stuff, just to get out onto the pitch was becoming too much. And that maybe we're getting towards that stage with him. But yeah, it is going to be a while. We all really want to see it. But I hope Bivol does box still on June the 1st, because 3 weeks, if somebody fancies it, why not? Joshua Buatsi is his number one contender with the WBA. And if you're him, if you're in decent kind of shape, and you'd imagine he would have been ticking over with a view to Anthony Yard being kind of imminent, although we never had or haven't yet got any kind of date or venue for that, will 3 weeks be long enough for him? Because these chances don't come along every day. They don't come along every day, and it would be big money. It would, to an extent, be nothing to lose. I never quite agree with that. There's always something to lose, but it is, as much as it ever could be, a shot to nothing. You know, you take Bivol, one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world, at short notice, then, you know, if it doesn't go your way, what can people really say, to be honest with you? And it's not going to affect where you stand all that much. So I guess we'll see.
I guess before we move on to talk about Bivol a bit more and talk about what the plan could be for him, something that I've noticed, and it's never good when these types of allegations start getting thrown about. But obviously, people obviously are highlighting the fact that Beterbiev has started to get a bit of a track record for pulling out of the fights as the years have gone on. And with the atypical finding in a VADA test back in January, some people are saying, you know, could he be under any form of, you know, performance enhancers or anything? Would people be right to have those suspicions about him, or is that just people online, you know, just trying to create a bit more controversy?
Well, I understand why people have suspicions, because the reality is that PED abuse in all sports that center around stamina, explosivity, speed, that kind of thing, you know, it happens, but people are doing it. We know that. It's been like that for a long time. It's nothing new. It does seem to be something that's very difficult to eradicate. I don't think there's anything like enough of a deterrent for it, a punishment for it in boxing. And that's why people feel that it's worth the risk to do it. But I don't feel like it's very helpful or justified to point at someone pulling out of fights at the age of nearly 40 and say that that's indicative of PED use, because for me, it's more indicative of what I was just talking about, which is that as you get older, you get wear and tear on your body. And he's been boxing for a really long time. He had a long amateur career. He came through that. It's not quite the same now, the Russian system, but he came through a very kind of what we describe now as old school Russian system. So he would have been boxing since he was a kid, you know, since he was 7, 8 years old, maybe, and taken away to an academy. And, you know, that is hard. It's hard. You know, it's very, very demanding. So the wear and tear on that by the end of his amateur career would have been fairly significant. And then as a pro, obviously, he's moved quick. But he absolutely lives the life, someone like Beterbiev. And we can't just look at everybody who gets to a certain age and still seems able to compete at a high level and declare, well, they must be on drugs. You know, that's some lazy bullshit, that is. Because if you choose to dedicate yourself utterly and completely to your craft, which everybody tells me he has his entire life, and you still have a hunger for it, then as discussed, you can prolong your career and you can stave off and delay that physical decline in a way that other people just wouldn't be able to. But there will always come a point where all of a sudden, or it's not all of a sudden, come a point where your body maybe just won't really do what you need it to anymore. And at nearly 40, you know, that's probably where he is. And that's why in the midpoint or towards the end of a hard training camp, something happens. Nobody will be more disappointed than him. But you're always going to get people pointing that finger. And I understand it. I understand it because it is happening. We all know it's happening. But I don't think you can just look at somebody and decide that he must be doing it, because how on earth could you compete at that level at that age if you're not on drugs? Well, some people can.
So flipping it back to obviously being a bit more about Dimitri here. Obviously you mentioned will he still box on June 1st? According to certain reports, Dimitri Bivol will still be boxing on June 1st with a rumored opponent of 22-0 Malik Zinad, who actually won an IBF eliminator in his last fight. So it seems like he's got a worthy opponent set in place for himself on June 1st still.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that this morning. I don't really know much about him, to be honest, and I haven't had much of a chance to have a look. But I mean, it's a great opportunity for him. And as you say, he's undefeated. He's got some credentials recently with that win, and that kind of stacks up, doesn't it? It stacks up. And in terms of you're casting around for someone, and he's always going to take that fight. You know, you'd be absolutely astonished if he didn't. But for Bivol, it's frustrating because he had that real breakout win against Canelo. We're all well aware of him from but he kind of exploded, won his world title, exploded, particularly with that one punch knockout in Monaco. And then off the back of that, he had some good performances, but some of which were a little bit underwhelming. And I think his star has started to wane a bit. And then he beat Canelo, and then bang, he's right up there towards the top of the sport again. And then since then, he was kind of wanting the rematch. He'd have loved the rematch, but it just hasn't really happened. And we saw him against Lyndon Arthur. Lyndon took it at pretty short notice himself, about 6 weeks, I think. And I thought did well. I was there that night, showed a lot of toughness to stick it out. But at no point really was he was in it, and he was competing as best he could. But at no point was Bivol ever in danger of losing that fight, basically. And you'd imagine that this one will probably be similar. And in your kind of peak years like this, it's just not what you want. I know that he'll be getting paid well for it, but it's just not what he wants. But it is still better to have him on the card, keep him on the card than not.
Andy, I think that's a good place to leave it. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Go and get yourself out there in the sunshine and enjoy the rest of your day. And thank you.
Cheers, Josh. Thanks.